Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Essence of Resilience, Stories of Triumph Over Trauma, by Tanya Lauer and Kathleen Parrish, narrated by Amanda Ronconi. Introduction. It's said that every scar tells a story. However, for many trauma survivors, the poorly healed wounds of yesterday remain voiceless, their stories untold. These untold stories fester like an underground poison, eroding truth and resulting in distorted beliefs and self-blame. The trauma survivor may echo these untruths over and over and over again. What happened to me was my fault. I deserved it. I am worthless. I am unlovable. I am a bad person. What happened to me isn't as bad as what happened to someone else. Over time, these distortions become the story that they tell others and whisper to themselves in the deepest part of their hearts. Sadly, many people who survive trauma remain silent about their experiences. They have learned to perfect the art of secrecy, holding the darkness of their wounds close. Perhaps they are numbly following dysfunctional family rules that prevent them from speaking of the terrible truth of their trauma. They may have learned to live with the menacing skeletons in the closet of their lives, the ancient bones rattling, threatening to expose their greatest shame. They may not ever fully recognize the way that trauma has changed their life. What is trauma? By Kathleen Parrish. As a trauma clinician, this question has been asked of me repeatedly over the years. Just the other day, a woman spoke to me about a sexual assault that she had experienced over 40 years ago. She told me that she had tried to move on with her life and that she didn't realize how much this event had affected her. She said, "I never really thought it was a big deal." As we continued to talk, she allowed the pain of her assault to surface, and she cried for the first time in many years. The truth is, she had tried, desperately and unsuccessfully, to bury that event in her past. Since then, she had been struggling with profound depression and alcoholism. Despite all of her attempts to quit drinking, she had been unable to maintain sobriety. Like so many trauma survivors, she was stuck in a cycle of self-destruction, propelling herself further into the murkiness of her shame, sadness, and anger. We talked about the aftermath of trauma, how it isn't the event itself that is damaging, but the story we tell ourselves afterward, i.e., the meaning we attach to it. So often it is the meaning of the trauma that erodes the identity and self-perception of the trauma survivor. As a result, they are unable to see their worth, value, or strengths. So, what is trauma? The question begs to be answered. The most accurate and formal definition of trauma is this: experiencing, witnessing, or being confronted by an event or events that pose a threat of death, injury, or sexual violation. In more general terms, I consider trauma to be any event that violates your sense of safety and well-being, or shatters your integrity, or sense of wholeness. It's something that causes incredible sadness, or a feeling of brokenness. Trauma can be isolated to one event, or can be a series of events, such as often occurs with childhood abuse or domestic violence. Trauma can cause significant changes in a person, so that they're unable to fully return to whom they were before the trauma occurred. In simpler terms, trauma is that sudden and tragic death that you weren't prepared for, wrenching away someone that you loved more than anything. It is the assault on your body that violates your will and choice. It is that family dinner scene, the one that happened every night where your father regularly became intoxicated and screamed at everyone. It is that constant hum of criticism and rejection that became the theme of your childhood, dished out by an angry parent. It is the parent who left you, either physically or emotionally, and never returned. Trauma is the spouse who is physically or emotionally abusive, leaving you to feel trapped and alone. Trauma can occur in so many different ways, yet create the same end result: feelings of fear, anger, brokenness, sadness, confusion, and shame. Traumatic events change people, altering their self-concept and perceptions of reality. Many trauma survivors will tell the before and after story. Before the trauma, they had hope, they could function, they could trust. After the trauma, they were forever changed. Trauma survivors often believe that trauma robbed them of everything, and they spend their time desperately trying to fill the hole in their heart. Depression, self-destruction, anger, and a sense of injustice often march in the sad processional of trauma. Although many people physically survive traumatic events, they may never really live again. It's as if a part of them died in the aftermath of trauma, and they flit through life like a ghost, on a haunting search for the remnants of who they were in the past, in the before. While some people are able to identify the point of entry, the time and place that trauma intruded into their lives, others are left sorting through a lifetime of painful experiences with uncertainty. Many survivors experienced complex ongoing trauma that occurred regularly during their childhood, or in a relationship with another person, like a spouse. This type of trauma may be the landscape of their life, altering the way that they developed, how they viewed themselves, and how they learned to understand the world around them. Those who lived a life where trauma was an everyday occurrence may feel that their experiences blurred the lines of reality and challenged their perceptions of what is normal, what is healthy, or what is safe. As a result, they may have developed coping mechanisms that allowed them to survive. Those who live lives of trauma may become experts at reading the environment, a trait called hypervigilance. Always on the edge, in a heightened stage of arousal, they learn to assess perceived threats from the environment and the people around them. They often become highly attuned to the noises, gestures, tones of voice that might be predictors of impending danger. Once free of these toxic environments, these individuals often struggle to cope in healthy ways. They may gravitate toward destructive relationships or chaotic environments, finding comfort in all too familiar scenarios that contribute to their inevitable self-destruction. They may live lives filled with self-deprecation and shame, void of any self-compassion. Many people who have traumatic pasts live with co-occurring disorders such as addiction, eating disorders, depression, or anxiety. In fact, research suggests that co-occurring disorders are a likely outcome for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. For these individuals, the process of recovery can seem more complicated. Some individuals who experienced significant trauma may be diagnosed with a personality disorder, such as borderline personality disorder. Many trauma survivors lived in a constant state of danger and panic, forcing them to learn skills to survive. In dysfunctional families, normal coping skills such as expression of feelings, healthy confrontation, and individuation are not effective. Consequently, a trauma survivor often develops skills that are more adapted to their environment to help them to survive their family system. Some of these behaviors might include dishonesty, withholding feelings, controlling behaviors, self-harm, and substance use. In my experience with co-occurring disorders, these problems speak to the devastation that trauma has caused. Trauma often shatters everything in its path. In the face of trauma, boundaries and trust are eroded and require safety, commitment, and honesty to be restored. One of the greatest difficulties in the aftermath of trauma is living with the self-condemnation of guilt and shame. Although traumatic events are painful, it is often the belief system that develops in the wake of the trauma that cuts a path of destruction in the life of the survivor. Many people never honor what the trauma meant to them. They are lost, staring at the wreckage of their lives like victims in the aftermath of a tornado, trying to salvage something that reminds them of who they were before the storm. I often tell clients that trauma recovery requires us to derive meaning from what we survived. Finding meaning in what we survived allows room for self-compassion and gratitude. It sheds light on our resilience, that part of ourselves that refused to surrender or die, It allows us to celebrate our strengths while learning to heal our wounds. Be advised, the stories here will be hard to hear. In truth, they were hard to write. At times, you may want to stop listening and walk away. That's okay. But go back to it and continue listening. Although you'll hear about trauma, loss, heartbreak, tragedy, and betrayal, you'll also hear about the strength and determination of the beautiful survivors who are honored here within this book. You will hear about the people who fought back, who refused to quit, who forgave and overcame unspeakable horrors. Perhaps you will hear about yourself in this book and find that an ancient, painful wound has awakened once more. You may experience emotions that you thought you had buried long ago. You may feel like you are reliving a heartbreak that you have worked so hard to forget. Our expectation is that traumatic pain is often rekindled when we are reminded of familiar events that may have wounded us, whether yesterday or years ago. Keep listening to the end of the story, bearing in mind that the most painful part of any story usually occurs in the middle, never the end. While this book is about suffering, it is also about the willingness to embrace the wounding of trauma and stand up in strength. The stories that follow are a song in the darkest of night, a song of freedom, forgiveness, and ferocity. The names and details of those found in this book have been changed to protect and honor confidentiality. However, the essence of their resilience shines forth. They are unforgettable individuals, filled with courage and strength. Our hope is that if you discover yourself in these passages, you can begin to claim your own courage and strength, your resilience. Perhaps you will begin to recognize that you are unforgettable too. What is the Essence of Resilience? By Tanya Lauer. What is resilience? What does it look like, feel like, sound like, or taste like? If you find it, can you later lose it? Can it slip away? Sometimes resilience can seem elusive and intangible, like energy, or like a fleeting emotion, like the weather that passes through the skies. Some individuals may appear to be more impervious to stress and trauma than others. There may be times when we feel more susceptible to stress ourselves, compared to other times when we are certain of our perseverance. It may seem that some are born with resilience, like they are with good bone structure or green eyes. The truth is, the essence of resilience is not available only for a select few. Resilience is not exclusive, regardless of perception. Breathing fully is an act of resilience. Listening to the stories in this book is participating in openness and curiosity, both acts of resilience. In the wake of traumatic injury, many feel like resilience is no longer within their grasp, but everyone is capable of resilience. The experience of trauma is incredibly devastating. The impact of the blow causes wounding and leaves a permanent impact on a person. In the throes of the fight, flight, or freeze stress response, the senses are heightened in preparation to ward off the impending threat. For this reason, a person in the midst of a traumatic episode experiences tremendous traction with their senses that remain like tattoos in their hearts and minds, playing back on repeat through the reel of flashbacks, nightmares, and triggers. For example, the room where a traumatic episode occurred could be described in robust detail decades later. The textures and colors stay vibrant through visual recall. Smells reminiscent of struggle and loss stay pungent and continue to infuse the survivor's olfactory senses. The haunting whisper of a perpetrator's voice, the loud boom of an explosion or fireworks, or the wailing of a siren result in a startle response and continue to assault the auditory senses. Many trauma survivors describe the taste of blood, vomit, or the taste of something beyond fear, the nausea of terror. Often, the safety of touch is severed due to traumatic violation, the connection with physical comfort lost, leaving behind only the bare ache of shame and loneliness. Because traumatic injury is felt through the senses, healing and the discovery of resilience requires a connection to a sensory experience. Beginning with the focus on breathing, trauma survivors can begin to awaken their senses in a compassionate way, reclaiming the present moment instead of feeling robbed by their painful past. In the following chapters, different practices are identified that help trauma survivors reclaim their senses, their stories, and their resilience. The story of surviving trauma is important to share, and is also effective in order to reduce the symptoms of post-traumatic stress, and to vitalize and energize the story that continues to play out in the present. Through the story, the trauma survivor can create a safe vehicle to travel through the treacherous landscapes of their traumatic histories, returning to the present with a new understanding and perspective about their survival. For some, there is no conscious memory of the past trauma. They have forgotten moments or even years of time, disassociating as a natural response in order to survive. Sharing a trauma story does not require describing explicit details of the traumatic event. Many fear reliving their traumatic experiences and do not want to feel re-traumatized. For this reason, they avoid facing their pain and instead hold on to their secret, which can become toxic and unbearable. Sharing stories of survival is one of the most important practices to cultivate resilience. This is the reason we decided to share stories in this book, to clearly demonstrate how resilience was found through the narrative of survival. A story can be shared in a myriad of ways and through many different creative mediums. Everyone has a story that may not have similar content, but shares similar emotions and themes. Often, these shared experiences are of loss, suffering, and of overcoming trauma. These themes and voices create bonds and harmonize together, creating threads and even lifelines of support and connection. We all have traumatic experiences, even if our symptoms don't meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. None of us comes through our lives unscathed. Through sharing the pain and burden of trauma with others, an unbreakable connectedness develops, community is found, and healing and resilience grows. Over the course of the last year, as I was working on compiling chapters for this book, I experienced a blow that challenged my own concept of resilience, not only theoretically but also personally. My father died suddenly and unexpectedly, and the way I discovered this was painful and traumatic. I remember that when I heard the word deceased out loud, I dropped down to the ground on my knees. Outside in the desert is where I heard this final news. One of the visual aspects of living in this environment is the brightness of the night sky, which is perpetually luminous and breathtaking. That night, though, held an incredible and undeniable glow. As I stared down at the ground, sick with grief and panic, I couldn't help but notice how the light reflected off the desert floor. When I looked up at the sky, I was overcome with wonder. The stars were so brilliant. I was reminded of my father and his love for the natural world. I felt his presence in the light that night. I still feel his presence now, and his support through the process of writing this book. My father was an avid reader and spent a tremendous amount of time during his days cradling a book. He was also always in my corner, cheering me on through losses and triumphs. When I told him about the upcoming publication of this book, he responded with pride and exuberance. The reality that my father will not have the opportunity to experience the unfolding of this book breaks my heart. He'll never have the chance to hold his daughter's book, which I know he would have loved to do. Still, the light from the stars that night remains eternal, like the love and connection that I feel with my father. One of the reasons why I love the work that I do as a trauma therapist and why I'm inspired to share my experiences with you as the listener is because the stories, like mine, don't end in darkness. When clients really engage in the truth of their survival, there is so much more to the story that is unpacked and revealed. This is why trauma work is so rewarding. Witnessing clients find and own their light and authenticity through their suffering is a profound experience that is often life-changing. This book is an attempt to honor all of the brave clients I have had the opportunity to work with. Many have spoken words for the first time. Words they never thought they would have the courage to utter out loud. I have seen clients with their hands trembling, terrified and overwhelmed, but still willing to move through their fears and open their hearts to their stories and their healing. The clients I have worked with are an incredible source of inspiration and have shown me what the essence of resilience really means. None of the following stories are one person's narrative. They are inspired by the essence of one person's resilience, or the composite of several themes of resilience, and are combinations of many traumatic themes and stories. Through the following stories, survivors were able to identify natural qualities and connections within themselves that helped them to gain meaning and transcend their profound experiences of pain. Each chapter's title, and the focus of the story, describes how this quality helped the survivor to reclaim their internal resilience. The stories are representative of the harsh reality of trauma and include content that may be shocking, painful, and overwhelming to hear. The motivation for writing this book was to portray honestly the brutality of trauma and to also describe the grace of resilience. Many of the trauma survivors I have worked with have wanted to share their stories as an effort to support others in finding their voice, their recovery. Some of the elements of the stories and the qualities of resilience may seem familiar for you, personally or for someone you care about or love. The hope is that these stories, although painful, may also be inspirational and relatable. Too many trauma survivors suffer in secret and in silence. My personal wish is that one listener will feel less alone, and one person could be inspired enough to reach out and cross the threshold to ask for help by stepping into a meeting or a therapist's office or confiding in a trusted person. Sharing our stories is a healing privilege. Thanks for your willingness to join us on this journey with these brave characters and their stories. Here is to your story, your light, and your resilience. 1. Story. One of the gravest dangers of trauma is living with the wounding in silence and in secret. Often the danger of living alone with the story of trauma, hard as this may be to believe, is more threatening than the trauma itself. When a person shares the story with another, this experience offers the greatest opportunity for healing. The reason people change and leave harmful or negative behaviors is most often due to the support and inspiration of another person. Evidence-based healing happens most frequently in the context of a relationship. When a person who has felt traumatized, disenfranchised, or worthless has the opportunity to feel heard through their story, they experience transformation and discover resilience. In the wake of trauma, survivors often feel like their story no longer belongs to them. The circumstances that caused the trauma or the people who inflicted the wounds become the authors of the story. The shame-based narrative that follows the suffering becomes the focus of the story. For example, if a child is abused or abandoned, then the trauma is internalized, resulting in an internal narrative like, I deserve to be abused or abandoned. I'm disposable. I'm damaged. I deserve pain. I'm worthless. I don't deserve to be loved or cared for. I don't matter. Once a person believes a narrative like this, they begin to make choices in accordance with these beliefs, and the wounding continues, because the power of the narrative continues. A trauma survivor can reclaim their power by reclaiming their story. Taking the pen or the keyboard back and deciding what the meaning of the story is for them can change the trajectory of their future and their potential for finding their authenticity and their resilience. The story encompasses not only the infliction of the traumatic wound, but also the story of healing and surviving it. The story of resilience and overcoming the trauma describes the true character of the survivor. For the abused and abandoned child, the survival narrative could shift from a shame-based narrative to one of resilience. My parents were ill and incapable of taking care of me, but their choices were not my responsibility. It's not my choice how I was treated then, but it is my choice how I treat myself now. I am stronger because I survived abuse and abandonment. I learned that my voice matters, my creative expression matters, and I deserve to be cared for and heard. I can trust myself to share my story, and I can trust others to understand my story. Trauma breaks us apart. Our stories bring us together. Storytelling is one of the oldest healing traditions. Storytelling is the cornerstone of psychotherapy, 12-step recovery, and is a foundation of connection and relationship building. Since we were living in caves, we have been sharing our stories to survive, heal, and understand one another. Our stories provide a bond that can tie us together, providing safety while revealing the light of our resilience. The practice of storytelling is intrinsically healing and provides the opposite physiological effects of stress responses. Sharing stories actually reduces post-traumatic stress symptoms. Writing our stories reduces illness symptoms and increases feelings of wellness and connection. Listening to stories creates calm, is a natural cure for stress, and lowers our blood pressure. It's no accident that we read bedtime stories to children as ritual prior to their bedtime, helping them transition into a restful state and fall asleep. Sharing our stories creates healing energy, calms us, and connects us. Sharing stories reduces PTSD symptoms. Writing stories reduces illness and increases feelings of wellness and connection. Listening to stories creates calm. While our stories are uniquely ours, they also capture shared experiences of our humanity, spanning time and crossing cultures. Even if the facts of our stories are different, the emotional struggle of survival is universal. Once our stories are shared, the essence of the story transcends beyond one's person and helps energize others' stories of survival as well. When trauma survivors share their stories, what emerges is not only their pathway through suffering, but also clarification of their capacity for survival. Resilience comes through the narrative, sometimes serendipitously, but it always emerges. Trauma survivors often greet their light and true selves through their story for the first time. When stories are heard and understood, compassion ensues, both with self and others. As long as we are breathing, all of our stories are still alive and have potential to change course and adopt new meaning. If we are conscious of the story we are currently creating in our lives, then we have to be accountable. We have to know that our story is our legacy. Our choices influence others, creating a ripple effect that extends to all those around us, impacting their stories as well. Often, trauma survivors feel powerless and trapped. They are also grieving devastating losses, either the loss of others or the lost parts of themselves, like their innocence, their integrity, their ability to feel joy or to dream. Through the story, there is an opportunity to reclaim self-compassion, childlike wonder and innocence, authenticity, and hope for the future. While trauma is inherently disempowering, sharing the story of it is empowering. After a traumatic event, many feel stuck in the past and prisoner to the stress response they are living with. Story offers the freedom to disengage from memories and sensations of the past and shift to focus on the present, or even on the future. Through a story, we can find flow and movement, choosing a course that supports who we are, what we want and hope for, and what is healing for us. A story can be expressed through movement, dance,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?